Marcus Aurelius Calvus stands naked in the marble hall of a Palatine villa, his skin glistening with scented oils, while wealthy Roman matrons circle him like predators evaluating prey. His beauty is undeniable. Golden hair catches the Mediterranean sunlight streaming through high windows, each strand appearing spun from precious metal. Green eyes hold depths that speak of intelligence deliberately dimmed for survival. Pupils contracted with the practiced numbness of someone who has learned to exist behind his own face. At 17, he possesses the kind of ethereal perfection that wealthy Romans purchase not just for pleasure, but as living art. A breathing sculpture, a warm statue that can weep. The women examining him speak in hushed, calculating tones. They evaluate his proportions with the same clinical detachment they might apply to selecting a prize horse or a piece of rare jewelry. One runs her jeweled fingers along his collarbone, testing the firmness of muscle beneath porcelain skin. Another lifts his chin to examine the symmetry of his features, turning his head left and right as if inspecting a potential purchase for flaws. They discuss his probable stamina, his training, his previous owners, his capacity for both submission and performance. But Marcus is no ordinary slave. He is a concubiness, a male concubine, caught in one of Rome's most complex and contradictory institutions. Beautiful enough to command enormous prices, educated enough to converse with senators, yet legally nothing more than property. His story, buried beneath centuries of silence and shame, reveals the brutal machinery of desire, power, and survival that operated at the heart of the Roman Empire. The institution of male concubinage in Rome operates within layers of legal fiction and social hypocrisy that would challenge even the most sophisticated moral philosopher. Roman law recognizes no difference between a concubine and any other slave. Both are res, things, property to be bought, sold, used, and discarded at their owner's whim. Yet the social reality proves far more complex. A common field slave might cost 50 denarii. A trained gladiator could command 500. But a perfectly trained male concubine like Marcus represents an investment of thousands, sometimes tens of thousands of denarii. This economic value creates its own form of protection and its own form of terror. Expensive slaves receive better food, medical care, and living conditions because their death or injury represents significant financial loss. But they also face expectations and pressures that cheaper slaves never encounter. Marcus must be simultaneously available and aloof, passionate and controlled, intelligent and submissive. He must read his owner's moods with supernatural accuracy, while never revealing his own thoughts or feelings. He must be whatever fantasy his owner requires, while maintaining the fiction that such performance comes naturally, rather than through years of systematic conditioning. The year is 127 CE. Hadrian rules from his marble throne, constructing walls across Britain while indulging his passion for Greek culture and beautiful young men. The emperor himself maintains a household of carefully selected male companions, legitimizing through imperial example what Roman law technically forbids for ordinary citizens. His favorite, Antinous, becomes the empire's unofficial standard for masculine beauty, inspiring sculptors and setting fashion trends among the wealthy. When Antinous drowns mysteriously in the Nile, Hadrian's grief transforms into imperial policy. He deifies the young man, establishes a city in his honor, and creates a religious cult that spreads across the eastern provinces. Rome's appetite for luxury has reached unprecedented heights during this golden age of imperial prosperity. Wealthy citizens compete not just through gladiatorial games or public monuments, but through the acquisition of exquisite human beings. Slaves who can recite Homer while pouring wine, their voices trained to achieve perfect pitch and emotional resonance. Dancers who move like living sculptures, their bodies sculpted through years of discipline until every gesture expresses mathematical beauty. And concubines who transform physical intimacy into theatrical performance, elevating base desire into aesthetic experience. The market for such specialized slaves operates through networks that span the entire Mediterranean world. Dealers in Alexandria identify promising children among war captives and debt slaves. Training houses in Athens and Corinth refine raw talent into marketable perfection. Auction houses in Rome display the finished products to buyers whose wealth can afford such investments. The entire system functions with the efficiency of any major industry, complete with specialists, quality standards, and established trade routes. But beneath this commercial veneer lies a web of human relationships shaped by power, dependency, and carefully managed affection. Masters develop genuine fondness for their beautiful slaves while never forgetting their fundamental ownership. Concubines learn to simulate love and desire so convincingly that they sometimes fool themselves. The boundaries between performance and reality blur until authentic emotion becomes indistinguishable from professional competence. Marcus wasn't born into slavery. His father was a minor Greek nobleman from Corinth, his mother a freed slave with Gallic blood who had earned her freedom through 20 years of faithful service to a Roman household. The family lived in modest comfort on the outskirts of the city, where Marcus's father taught rhetoric to the sons of wealthy merchants, while his mother managed a small workshop producing fine textiles. For 8 years, Marcus knew childhood as it should be. He played with neighborhood children, learned letters from his father, helped his mother with simple tasks around the workshop. He developed the quick intelligence and natural charm that would later make him valuable as property. But during these early years, these qualities belonged to him alone. The family's downfall began with Marcus's father's political ambitions. Hoping to advance his status and secure Roman citizenship for his family, he invested heavily in supporting a particular candidate for local magistrate. When that candidate lost spectacularly amid accusations of corruption and bribery, the family found themselves not only financially ruined, but politically compromised. Creditors, who might have shown patience to a politically neutral debtor, became aggressive when the family's association with scandal became public knowledge. Roman law offered several options for resolving debt, but none of them pleasant for the debtor. Marcus's father could sell himself into slavery to pay his creditors, leaving his family free but destitute. He could flee the city and live as an exile, abandoning his property and leaving his wife and child to face the consequences. Or he could negotiate partial payment through the sale of family members into slavery, retaining enough to start over while sacrificing those he loved most. The choice that Marcus's father made reveals the calculating cruelty that Roman society imposed even on its victims. Rather than sell himself and leave his family with nothing, he negotiated the sale of 8-year-old Marcus to cover the largest portion of the debt. The boy's obvious beauty and intelligence commanded a premium price that would satisfy the most aggressive creditors and provide enough surplus to establish the family in a different city. Marcus's mother wept, but she also understood the mathematics of survival. One child's sacrifice could preserve the family's chance for eventual recovery. The slave merchant who purchased Marcus was Gaius Livius Andronicus, a specialist in identifying and developing human potential for luxury markets. Unlike dealers who focused on manual laborers or household servants, Andronicus invested in children who showed promise for more sophisticated roles. He maintained training facilities in Rome, Athens, and Alexandria, where promising slaves learned skills that would make them valuable to the wealthiest buyers in the empire. Andronicus recognized immediately what the boy would become. The combination of Greek intelligence, Gallic physical beauty, and the psychological vulnerability created by family separation made Marcus ideal raw material for the concubine trade. Not a laborer or a scribe, but something far more valuable and far more dangerous. A living work of art designed to fulfill the fantasies of those wealthy enough to afford such luxuries. The training begins immediately and operates according to principles that combine educational excellence with psychological manipulation. Marcus is sent to a specialized household in Rome, where male concubines are crafted like fine wines, aged and refined until they achieve perfect complexity. The facility occupies an entire villa on the Esquiline Hill, complete with libraries, gymnasia, music rooms, and private chambers designed for intimate instruction. The curriculum encompasses far more than sexual technique, though that element proves central to everything else. Marcus learns to read Latin and Greek fluently, not just for practical communication, but for the aesthetic pleasure of delivering beautiful language beautifully. His voice is trained in song, beginning with simple scales and progressing to complex operatic passages that can move listeners to tears or transport them to states of transcendent ecstasy. His body is sculpted through dance and athletic exercise, every muscle developed to achieve the perfect balance between strength and grace. He studies rhetoric under former senators who fell from political favor but retained their intellectual gifts. Philosophy lessons with aging Stoics and Epicureans teach him to engage in sophisticated discourse while maintaining the emotional detachment necessary for survival. Mathematics and geometry provide the foundation for understanding proportion, harmony, and the aesthetic principles that govern beauty itself. Even astronomy finds its place in the curriculum, since wealthy Romans expect their entertainers to discuss celestial movements with the same fluency they apply to poetry or politics. But underneath this education runs a darker current of conditioning, designed to break down individual will and rebuild it according to external demands. Marcus learns to read the micro-expressions of powerful men and women, identifying desires before they are consciously formed and responding to needs that have not yet been articulated. He discovers which senators prefer gentle submission and which demand elaborate resistance, which merchants want intellectual companionship and which seek only physical release, which matrons desire sophisticated conversation, and which prefer silent beauty. The psychological training proves more invasive than any physical instruction. Marcus learns to compartmentalize his consciousness, splitting his awareness between the performer who responds to others' desires and the observer who maintains enough detachment to survive emotionally. He masters the art of appearing completely available while maintaining psychological barriers that protect his core self from complete dissolution. He develops multiple personalities, each calibrated to different types of clients and situations. Most crucially, he learns to please. Not just physically, but intellectually, emotionally, aesthetically. A concubine must be a companion, a fantasy, a living work of art that breathes, thinks, and responds according to carefully programmed patterns. He must anticipate needs, fulfill desires, and create experiences that justify the enormous investments his buyers make in acquiring his services. He must be simultaneously real enough to provide genuine satisfaction and artificial enough to remain safely objectified. The other students in the training facility become Marcus's first experience of community since his family's destruction. But even these relationships operate according to rules designed to prevent genuine connection. Competition for resources and instructor attention creates constant tension among the young slaves. Friendships that develop too deeply are broken up through strategic reassignments or punishments. Sexual relationships between students are forbidden, not from moral concerns, but because they might interfere with the emotional availability required for serving clients. Marcus forms a particularly close bond with Lucius, a boy 2 years older whose aristocratic Roman family sold him to pay gambling debts. Together, they navigate the complex social dynamics of the training facility, sharing survival strategies and providing emotional support during the most difficult periods of their conditioning. But when Lucius begins showing signs of depression that threaten his market value, he disappears one night without explanation. Marcus never learns whether his friend was sold early, transferred to a different facility, or simply eliminated as a failed investment. The sexual culture of Rome defies simple categorization, operating according to principles that seem contradictory to modern sensibilities, but reflect the empire's fundamental obsessions with power, status, and social hierarchy. Unlike later Christian morality, Romans don't condemn homosexuality outright. Instead, they obsess over dominance and submission, creating elaborate taxonomies of sexual behavior that determine social standing more than gender preferences. A Roman citizen can penetrate anyone, male or female, slave or free, without social condemnation, as long as he maintains the active, dominant role. Senators who enjoy the company of beautiful young men face no criticism, provided they assert their superiority through sexual conquest. Merchants who prefer male slaves to their wives encounter no legal or social obstacles as long as they remain the penetrating party. Even married men can maintain male concubines openly, treating them as legitimate household members whose presence reflects well on their owner's wealth and sophistication. But to be penetrated, to submit, to take the passive role, marks one as fundamentally inferior regardless of their legal or social status. A citizen who allows himself to be dominated sexually loses his political rights and social standing as surely as if he had been convicted of treason. Free men who prostitute themselves face legal consequences that include loss of citizenship. Even voluntary submission to sexual domination can result in social exile and economic ruin. This creates a brutal hierarchy where male concubines like Marcus exist in perpetual contradiction. Desired for their beauty and intelligence, yet despised for their submission. Valued as expensive acquisitions that reflect their owner's wealth, yet degraded through the very acts that justify their existence. They occupy a liminal space between human and object, person and property, individual and commodity. The contradiction becomes even more complex when examined through the lens of Roman religious and philosophical traditions. Stoic philosophy, popular among the educated classes, teaches that true virtue lies in emotional control and rational detachment. Yet the same men who study Stoic texts engage in passionate relationships with young slaves that involve intense emotional investment and physical indulgence. Epicurean philosophy advocates the pursuit of pleasure as life's highest goal, but only for those free to choose their pleasures rather than those compelled to provide them. Religious traditions add another layer of complexity. Mystery cults popular among wealthy Romans often involve ritual sexual acts that blur the boundaries between sacred and profane. The cult of Mithras, particularly popular among military officers, includes initiation ceremonies that involve nudity, physical contact, and symbolic submission to divine authority. The cult of Dionysus celebrates sexual excess as a form of religious ecstasy. Yet these same religious systems maintain strict hierarchies that exclude slaves from full participation while using their bodies for sacred purposes. Marcus learns to navigate these contradictions with the skill of a trained diplomat. He must embody philosophical ideals while remaining available for physical use. He must participate in religious ceremonies while maintaining his status as property. He must demonstrate intellectual sophistication while never challenging his owner's intellectual superiority. He must express passion and desire while never claiming the right to autonomous emotional life. Marcus's first buyer is Lucius Flavius Maximus, a wealthy merchant with political ambitions and a wife who tolerates his indulgences as long as they remain discreet. Maximus made his fortune importing silk from China and spices from India, building a commercial empire that spans 3 continents and employs thousands of workers. His household reflects this international scope, with slaves from Britain to Ethiopia, and artwork collected from across the known world. For 2 years, Marcus lives in what can only be described as a comfortable prison. His quarters occupy an entire wing of Maximus's villa, complete with private bath, library, and garden courtyard. The rooms are furnished with luxury that exceeds what many free citizens enjoy. Persian carpets cover marble floors. Silk hangings imported from China filter the Mediterranean sunlight. Furniture crafted by master artisans provides both beauty and comfort. His clothing comes from the finest workshops in the empire. Silk tunics dyed with precious purple murex shells. Woolen cloaks woven so finely they feel like liquid against the skin. Jewelry crafted from gold and precious stones that would represent a lifetime's wealth for ordinary Romans. Even his bathing supplies cost more than most slaves earn in a year. Perfumed oils from Arabia, soaps made with rare herbs, cosmetics that enhance his natural beauty while maintaining the illusion of effortless perfection. He dines on delicacies imported from across the empire, often sharing meals with Maximus and his guests. Oysters from Britain, wine from Gaul, honey from Greece, exotic fruits from Africa. The household chef, himself a highly valued slave who trained in the kitchens of emperors, prepares elaborate banquets that transform eating into aesthetic experiences. Marcus learns to appreciate subtle flavors and sophisticated presentations while maintaining his own physical perfection through careful portion control. Yet beneath this luxury lies the constant awareness that he cannot leave without permission. He cannot refuse any request. He cannot form friendships or romantic attachments outside his owner's household. His daily schedule depends entirely on Maximus's whims and needs. When the merchant wants companionship, Marcus provides intellectual conversation and emotional support. When Maximus desires sexual release, Marcus offers his body without complaint or resistance. When social occasions require an impressive display of wealth, Marcus performs as a living status symbol. The psychological dynamics of their relationship prove far more complex than simple owner-slave interactions. Maximus genuinely enjoys Marcus's company, appreciating his intelligence, wit, and cultural sophistication. They discuss literature, philosophy, and politics with the ease of intellectual equals. Maximus often seeks Marcus's opinions on business decisions, recognizing that his concubine's insights into human nature provide valuable guidance for commercial negotiations. But this apparent intimacy never extends to genuine equality. Maximus treats Marcus with the casual affection one might show a favorite hunting dog or prized racehorse. There is genuine fondness, even moments of tenderness, but never recognition of Marcus as a person with autonomous desires and rights. When Marcus expresses opinions that align with Maximus's interests, they are welcomed and praised. When his views diverge from his owner's preferences, they are dismissed or ignored. The sexual relationship between them operates according to scripts that Maximus writes and Marcus performs. Sometimes, Maximus wants passionate resistance that he can overcome through superior strength and will. Other times, he prefers eager submission that confirms his desirability and power. Marcus learns to read these moods and provide appropriate responses, manufacturing authentic-seeming emotions on demand while protecting his genuine feelings from invasion. Maximus treats Marcus with the casual affection one might show a favorite hunting dog. There is genuine fondness, even moments of tenderness. But there is never equality, never humanity. Marcus exists for Maximus's pleasure, convenience, and status. When the merchant hosts dinner parties, Marcus performs poetry between courses, his voice trained to achieve perfect pitch and emotional resonance. The guests marvel at his beauty and accomplishments, while discussing his attributes as if he were in particularly fine vintage of wine. The dinner performances become elaborate theatrical productions that showcase both Marcus's talents and Maximus's wealth. Standing before reclining senators and their wives, Marcus recites passages from Homer that transform the dining room into ancient Troy. His voice carries listeners across centuries and continents, making them participants in epic battles and tragic loves. Between verses, servants refill wine cups and present new courses, but the audience remains focused on the beautiful young man whose words create entire worlds from memory. Sometimes, Maximus requests more intimate performances designed to stimulate desire rather than intellectual appreciation. Marcus strips to a simple linen tunic and performs erotic poetry, while moving through choreographed dances that emphasize his physical perfection. The combination of beautiful language and beautiful form creates an aesthetic experience that elevates lust into something approaching art. The guests watch with the rapt attention of religious devotees witnessing sacred mysteries. When Maximus travels on business, Marcus accompanies him as a living symbol of wealth and refinement. Their journeys take them across the empire, from the foggy ports of Britain to the sun-baked markets of Egypt. Marcus learns to adapt his performances to different cultural contexts, adjusting his repertoire to match local tastes while maintaining his essential appeal. In Athens, he emphasizes his philosophical training. In Alexandria, he demonstrates mathematical knowledge. In Gaul, he performs Celtic songs learned from his mother's memories. These travels provide Marcus with his only exposure to the wider world beyond his owner's immediate control. But even this freedom remains illusory. He sees exotic locations and meets interesting people, but always as Maximus's property rather than as an independent traveler. He cannot explore cities on his own or form relationships with people he meets. Every experience filters through his role as an expensive accessory to his owner's business activities. When Maximus feels lonely or stressed, Marcus provides comfort without complaint or question. These moments of vulnerability reveal the merchant's human frailties and create the closest thing to genuine intimacy that their relationship allows. Marcus learns Maximus's fears about business competition, his anxieties about political changes, his disappointments with his legitimate family relationships. In response, he offers sympathetic listening, gentle physical comfort, and emotional support that helps his owner maintain equilibrium in a demanding world. But even these intimate moments operate according to strict boundaries that remind Marcus of his fundamental status. He can comfort Maximus's pain, but cannot express his own suffering. He can provide emotional support, but cannot expect reciprocal care. He can know Maximus's secrets, but cannot share his own thoughts or feelings. The relationship allows for closeness, but never for equality, for affection, but never for love, for humanity, but never for personhood. The psychological toll is immense and accumulates gradually like poison building in his system. Marcus develops the emotional numbness common among long-term abuse survivors, but this detachment requires constant maintenance and comes with its own costs. He learns to dissociate during intimate encounters, to split his consciousness between the performer and the observer, the body that responds to touch and the mind that retreats to protected spaces. This psychological survival mechanism allows him to endure experiences that might otherwise destroy his sanity, but it also distances him from his own physical and emotional responses. The dissociation becomes so habitual that Marcus sometimes loses track of his authentic reactions to situations. He finds himself automatically scanning for others' expectations and adjusting his responses accordingly, even when no performance is required. Genuine emotions become difficult to identify and trust. Joy feels suspicious because it might interfere with professional availability. Anger seems dangerous because it could displease his owner. Sadness appears useless because it serves no one's needs but his own. Sleep becomes his only refuge from constant performance, but even dreams offer limited escape. Marcus often finds himself dreaming of performing for audiences that never allow him to stop, of reciting poetry in an endless succession of dining rooms, of being evaluated and purchased by buyers who discuss his attributes in languages he cannot understand. He wakes exhausted from nights spent laboring in his unconscious mind, providing entertainment and pleasure even while asleep. The physical effects of chronic stress begin to manifest despite his careful diet and exercise regimen. His hair loses some of its lustrous shine. His skin develops a subtle pallor that cosmetics cannot completely disguise. His voice occasionally trembles during performances, betraying the emotional strain he works so hard to conceal. Maximus notices these changes and adjusts Marcus's routine to preserve his investment, providing additional rest periods and medical attention when necessary. But the most damaging aspect of his situation proves to be the isolation from genuine human connection. Marcus becomes expert at appearing present, while keeping his true self locked away in mental fortresses that even his owners cannot breach. He develops elaborate internal worlds where he can retreat during the most difficult moments, imaginary spaces populated by people who value him for his humanity rather than his utility. These fantasy relationships provide crucial psychological relief, but they also emphasize the absence of authentic connection in his actual life. Yet, even within the confines of slavery, Marcus finds moments of genuine connection that remind him of his essential humanity. There is Julia, Maximus's 15-year-old daughter, who treats him with kindness and teaches him to read Greek poetry for pleasure rather than performance. She seems unaware of the sexual nature of Marcus's role in the household, viewing him simply as an educated companion who can discuss literature and philosophy with intelligence and insight. Julia's innocence creates a safe space where Marcus can express intellectual curiosity without sexual overtones or performance expectations. She brings him scrolls of poetry to read together, asks his opinions about philosophical questions, and shares her own thoughts about literature and life with the unselfconscious enthusiasm of youth. These conversations remind Marcus of what it feels like to be valued for his mind rather than his body, his thoughts rather than his availability. There is also Gaius, another male slave in the household, who works as Maximus's personal secretary and business manager. Unlike Marcus, Gaius was educated for administrative rather than sexual service, though his handsome appearance certainly influenced his selection for the position. The two young men share stolen conversations during brief moments when their duties overlap, finding comfort in their shared understanding of slavery's psychological challenges. With Gaius, Marcus can drop his performed personality and express genuine emotions without fear of punishment or judgment. They discuss their memories of freedom, their hopes for eventual manumission, their strategies for surviving the daily indignities of slave life. Gaius provides practical advice about managing the psychological stress of serving demanding masters, while Marcus shares techniques for maintaining emotional distance during intimate situations. Their friendship develops slowly and carefully, constrained by the constant surveillance that characterizes slave life, but nourished by their desperate need for authentic human connection. They create subtle signals for communicating when others are watching, develop code words for discussing dangerous topics, and find ways to provide mutual support that appear casual to outside observers. But Rome's social machinery crushes such connections ruthlessly, operating according to principles that view slave relationships as threats to owner control and property values. When Maximus discovers the friendship between Marcus and Gaius during a routine inspection of his household's operations, his response demonstrates the calculated cruelty that sustains the entire system of slavery. Rather than simply punish the two young men, he orchestrates their separation in a way designed to maximize psychological damage and prevent future attachments. Maximus sells Gaius to a gladiatorial school in Capua, one of the empire's most notorious training facilities, where survival rates rarely exceed 50%. The sale occurs without warning or opportunity for farewell. Marcus awakens one morning to find Gaius's quarters empty, and learns of his friend's fate only through casual conversation with other household slaves. The message becomes immediately clear. Even friendship becomes a luxury that slaves cannot afford without risking their lives or the lives of those they care about. The loss of Gaius devastates Marcus in ways that surprise him with their intensity. He had not realized how much he depended on their conversations for emotional stability, how much comfort he derived from knowing that one person in the world valued him as a human being, rather than a sexual object. The friendship had provided a refuge from the constant performance of his daily life, a space where he could express genuine thoughts and feelings without calculation or artifice. In response to this loss, Marcus makes a crucial psychological adjustment that will define the rest of his life. He decides to never again risk caring for another person in a way that could be used against him. This emotional withdrawal provides protection from future manipulation, but it also completes his transformation from person to object. He becomes exactly what the system designed him to be: a beautiful, skilled, responsive creature without dangerous human attachments or autonomous emotional life. The change in Marcus's behavior proves subtle but significant. He continues to perform his duties with perfect competence, providing sexual services, intellectual companionship, and aesthetic pleasure according to his training and his owner's expectations. But the spark of genuine humanity that had occasionally flickered beneath his performed persona disappears entirely. He becomes a more perfect concubine and a less complete human being. Maximus notices the improvement in Marcus's professional demeanor without understanding its psychological cost. The young slave's performances become more consistently excellent, his availability more complete, his emotional responses more perfectly calibrated to his owner's needs. What Maximus interprets as maturation and acceptance of his role, Marcus experiences as a kind of psychological death. He has learned that survival requires the elimination of everything that makes survival worthwhile. Julia, Maximus's daughter, also notices the change in Marcus's demeanor during their literature discussions. Where he once engaged with poetry and philosophy with genuine enthusiasm and personal insight, he now provides technically excellent analysis without emotional investment. She asks him about his changed attitude, but Marcus deflects her concerns with skilled performance of his previous personality. Even with this kind young woman who has never harmed him, he can no longer risk authentic expression. The lesson that Marcus learns from Gaius's fate extends beyond personal relationships to encompass every aspect of his emotional life. He stops allowing himself to enjoy sunsets or appreciate music for their own sake, recognizing that such pleasures create vulnerabilities that can be exploited by those who control his circumstances. He ceases to hope for eventual freedom or imagine alternative futures, understanding that such thoughts interfere with acceptance of his present situation. He abandons all forms of desire that extend beyond immediate survival needs. Marcus's beauty peak coincides with his greatest vulnerability. At 19, he is sold to Sextus Cornelius Sulla, a senator with darker appetites and fewer scruples than his previous owner. Sulla's villa on the Aventine Hill becomes a theater of elaborate sexual performances, designed not just for pleasure, but for political power. Senators, magistrates, and foreign dignitaries attend parties where beautiful slaves enact mythological scenes, philosophical dialogues, and erotic fantasies. Marcus finds himself cast as Ganymede to Sulla's Jupiter, as Apollo to visiting poets, as whatever character the evening's script demands. He wears costumes of gold and precious stones. He speaks lines written by professional dramatists. He becomes a living prop in Rome's endless theater of power and status. The irony is not lost on him. A man trained in philosophy and rhetoric, reduced to acting out the fantasies of his intellectual inferiors. Sulla's household reveals the full corruption at the heart of Roman concubinage. Young boys and girls, some barely past childhood, are trained in sexual submission through methods that would horrify modern sensibilities. Older concubines who have lost their beauty are discarded or forced into servicing the household's less distinguished guests. The villa operates like a factory for manufacturing and consuming human beauty, with Marcus as one of its most prized products. The senator himself embodies the contradictions of Roman sexual morality. Publicly, he advocates for traditional family values and mourns the decline of Roman virtue. Privately, he orchestrates elaborate scenes of sexual domination that blur the lines between performance and abuse. He justifies his behavior through Greek philosophy, claiming that beauty must be appreciated and that pleasure is a worthy pursuit for civilized men. But his actions reveal the hollow core of such rationalizations. Marcus begins to understand that he exists within a system designed to destroy him slowly. Each performance chips away at his sense of self. Each owner reinforces his status as property rather than person. Each year brings him closer to the inevitable decline that awaits all concubines. He watches older men in similar positions, their beauty faded, their value diminished, struggling to find relevance in households that have moved on to younger, fresher attractions. The psychological violence is as systematic as any physical torture. Marcus is never allowed to express genuine emotions, except when they serve his owner's needs. His intelligence is valued only when it enhances his performance. His preferences, desires, and dreams are irrelevant unless they align with his function as entertainment and sexual service. He becomes a master of emotional performance, able to simulate love, fear, joy, or sorrow on command, while keeping his authentic self buried so deeply that even he sometimes forgets it exists. Yet Rome's political landscape provides unexpected opportunities for those clever enough to exploit them. Marcus begins to understand that information has value in a city built on intrigue and ambition. The wealthy men who use his services often speak freely in his presence, assuming that a concubine lacks the intelligence or motivation to understand their conversations. They discuss military campaigns, political alliances, financial schemes, and family secrets with casual indiscretion. Marcus develops a careful network of information gathering and trading. Nothing treasonous or dangerous enough to risk execution, but valuable enough to provide small advantages and protections. He learns which senators are planning to betray their allies, which merchants are overextending their credit, which governors are embezzling from their provinces. This knowledge becomes a form of currency, traded for small favors, better treatment, or protection from abuse. The system works until it doesn't. Marcus makes the mistake of trusting information to Gaius Brutus Casca, a young aristocrat who frequents Sulla's parties. Casca uses Marcus's intelligence to betray a rival, then reveals Marcus as his source to protect himself from retaliation. Sulla, terrified of being implicated in a political scandal, decides that Marcus has become too dangerous to keep. But rather than sell him immediately, Sulla chooses a more creative punishment. He loans Marcus to Lucius Domitius Corbulo, a military commander preparing for campaigns in Germania. The message is clear. Marcus will serve the soldiers until his beauty is destroyed by rough usage and harsh conditions, then be abandoned in barbarian territory to die. The military camp along the Rhine frontier becomes a new kind of hell. Roman soldiers view male concubines with a mixture of desire and disgust. They use Marcus for sexual release while despising him for his submission. His educated speech marks him as an outsider. His soft hands and unmarked skin identify him as privileged property rather than a fellow warrior. He exists in a liminal space, neither fully Roman nor completely foreign, neither soldier nor civilian. Commander Corbulo treats Marcus as a test of his soldiers' discipline. Units that perform well in training exercises earn access to the concubine as a reward. Those who fail in their duties are forbidden his company. Marcus becomes a living incentive system, his body transformed into currency for motivating military performance. The psychological impact of being reduced to a prize to be won or lost pushes him toward complete emotional breakdown. Yet, even in this brutal environment, Marcus discovers unexpected allies. Titus Flavius Silva, a career centurion with 30 years of service, recognizes something familiar in the concubine's haunted eyes. Silva himself survived years of abuse as a young soldier before earning respect through competence and courage. He begins providing Marcus with small protections, teaching him basic combat skills, and sharing survival strategies learned through decades of military service. Silva's mentorship represents Marcus's first experience with genuine masculine friendship. Unlike his owners who viewed him as property, or his clients who saw him as entertainment, Silva treats him as a fellow human being capable of growth and change. The centurion never attempts to use Marcus sexually, instead offering respect and guidance without expectation of return. For the first time in his adult life, Marcus experiences what it means to be valued for his potential rather than his appearance. But the Roman military machine has no place for such relationships. When Silva is killed during a skirmish with Germanic tribes, Marcus loses not just a protector, but his last connection to hope. The remaining soldiers view Silva's death as removing any constraints on their treatment of the concubine. Without the centurion's protection, Marcus becomes fair game for any abuse the legion wishes to inflict. The final degradation comes during a military festival celebrating Rome's victory over a barbarian village. The soldiers force Marcus to reenact the conquest, playing the role of a defeated Germanic chieftain who must submit to Roman authority. The performance combines sexual humiliation with ethnic mockery, turning Marcus into a symbol of barbarian weakness and Roman dominance. The irony cuts deeply. A Greek-born Roman citizen, reduced to representing the very enemies Rome seeks to destroy. That night, Marcus makes his choice. Rather than endure further degradation, he decides to escape into the Germanic wilderness. Death in the forests seems preferable to continued existence as a sexual trophy for Roman soldiers. He steals basic supplies, waits for the guards to drink themselves into stupor, and slips away into the darkness beyond the camp's perimeter. The Germanic forests offer a different kind of freedom and terror. Marcus has no survival skills beyond those learned in urban slavery. He cannot hunt, cannot navigate by stars, cannot distinguish between edible and poisonous plants. But he can walk. He can choose his own direction. For the first time in his adult life, every step represents his own decision rather than someone else's command. The barbarian tribes who eventually find him present another moral complexity. Some Germanic peoples practice slavery, but their systems operate differently than Rome's elaborate hierarchies. Marcus's obvious foreign origin and soft appearance mark him as valuable property, but his lack of useful skills limits his worth. More importantly, his psychological damage makes him unsuitable for the kind of intimate domestic service that characterized his Roman captivity. Instead, Marcus finds himself assigned to the household of Arminius, a Germanic chieftain who fought against Roman expansion and harbors deep hatred for everything associated with the empire. Arminius sees Marcus as a living symbol of Roman decadence and corruption. Where Roman owners prized the concubine's beauty and education, the Germanic leader views these qualities as evidence of civilization's weakness. The cultural shock proves overwhelming. Germanic society values physical strength, martial prowess, and tribal loyalty above the intellectual refinements that defined Marcus's training. His ability to recite Greek philosophy means nothing to people who measure worth through hunting skills and battlefield courage. His carefully cultivated aesthetic perfection appears artificial and disturbing to those who prize natural simplicity. Yet this dismissal of his traditional value creates unexpected space for psychological recovery. Without constant sexual demands and performance expectations, Marcus begins to rediscover aspects of his personality that survived years of systematic suppression. He learns Germanic language and customs. He develops basic survival skills. He experiences genuine human relationships based on mutual respect rather than ownership dynamics. Brunhilde, Arminius's sister, becomes Marcus's unlikely savior. A warrior woman who fought alongside men against Roman expansion, she recognizes the damage that imperial slavery inflicted on the former concubine. Her own experiences with Roman brutality create common ground for understanding trauma and recovery. She teaches Marcus practical skills while respecting his need for emotional distance and personal autonomy. Under Brunhilde's guidance, Marcus slowly rebuilds his sense of self. He learns to make decisions based on personal preference rather than others' expectations. He discovers physical labor that serves his own needs rather than entertaining owners. He experiences conversations focused on his thoughts and feelings rather than his appearance and performance. The healing process is slow and incomplete, but it represents the first genuine progress toward psychological freedom he has known since childhood. But the past cannot be escaped so easily. Roman expeditions regularly penetrate Germanic territory, seeking slaves, tribute, and military intelligence. When a reconnaissance patrol captures Marcus during a hunting expedition, his former identity becomes impossible to hide. The Roman soldiers immediately recognize his training and background. Within days, he finds himself transported back to imperial territory and sold to yet another owner. This final captivity breaks something fundamental in Marcus's spirit. Having tasted genuine freedom and human dignity, the return to sexual slavery becomes unbearable. His new owner, a wealthy merchant in Gaul, expects the same performances and submission that characterized his earlier service. But Marcus has changed. The psychological numbing that once protected him no longer functions. Every touch, every command, every moment of degradation cuts through his defenses like a blade. Marcus begins planning his final escape, not to another territory or different master, but to the ultimate freedom that death represents. He studies the household's routines, identifies opportunities for solitude, and prepares for an act that will remove him permanently from the machinery of Roman sexual exploitation. The decision brings strange peace. For the first time in his adult life, he will make a choice that no one can reverse or override. But even this final agency is denied him. When the merchant discovers Marcus's plans, he sells the concubine to a gladiatorial school rather than risk losing his investment. The decision reflects the ultimate Roman pragmatism. A dead slave has no value, but a gladiator provides entertainment even while dying. Marcus's desire for death will be transformed into profit and spectacle. The gladiatorial training compound represents a different kind of hell, but one that offers unexpected redemption. Unlike concubinage, which requires submission and performance, gladiatorial combat demands courage and skill. For the first time since childhood, Marcus is valued for qualities beyond his appearance. His intelligence becomes useful for learning combat techniques. His physical conditioning translates into fighting ability. His willingness to die transforms from tragic desperation into warrior courage. The trainers recognize Marcus's unusual background and develop a unique fighting persona around his history. he becomes Ganymedes the Beautiful, a gladiator whose backstory as a fallen concubine adds dramatic tension to his arena performances. The Roman audience loves the narrative irony. A man who once served their sexual fantasies now risks his life for their entertainment. His every victory represents a form of rebellion against the system that created him. Marcus embraces this new identity with fierce determination. Combat provides the physical expression of rage that concubinage forbade. Each opponent represents every owner who used his body without permission. Each victory symbolizes resistance against the forces that sought to destroy his humanity. The arena becomes his stage for reclaiming agency through violence and skill rather than beauty and submission. His fighting style reflects his unique background. Where most gladiators rely on pure aggression or technical precision, Marcus combines intelligence with desperation in ways that prove devastatingly effective. He studies his opponent's weaknesses, exploits their assumptions about his softness, and fights with the calculated fury of someone who has nothing left to lose. The crowd responds to his performances with enthusiasm that transcends typical gladiatorial appreciation. But the arena's freedom proves as illusory as every other aspect of Roman society. Marcus remains property, his life subject to his owner's economic calculations and the crowd's entertainment preferences. His victories earn him better food, medical care, and sleeping quarters, but never genuine autonomy. He can die with honor, but he cannot live with dignity. The fundamental contradiction of his existence persists even in combat. The end comes during the Saturnalia Games of 156 CE. Marcus faces Maximus the Thracian, a veteran gladiator whose record includes over 40 arena victories. The match is designed as a spectacle of experience versus desperate courage, seasoned skill against raw determination. The Roman audience expects a quick, brutal demonstration of professional superiority over amateur rebellion. Instead, they witness something unprecedented. Marcus fights with such intelligent ferocity that he actually wounds the champion, drawing blood from an opponent who has dominated the arena for years. The crowd's excitement reaches fever pitch as the former concubine demonstrates that beauty and suffering can be transformed into deadly competence. For moments that stretch like hours, it appears that the impossible might occur. But Maximus has survived too many battles to be defeated by theatrical narrative. His final combination of attacks overwhelms Marcus's defenses, opening wounds that prove mortal despite the crowd's demands for mercy. As Marcus lies dying in the sand, he achieves something that eluded him throughout his life. He dies as himself, having fought for his own honor rather than others' pleasure. The transformation from sexual property to warrior, however brief, represents a form of victory that transcends the arena's brutal calculus. The Roman audience's reaction proves complex and telling. They cheer Maximus's victory while mourning Marcus's death. They celebrate the entertainment value while recognizing the tragedy of wasted potential. They applaud the spectacle while unconsciously acknowledging the system that created it. In death, Marcus becomes what he could never be in life, a symbol of human dignity that resonates beyond his designated function. Marcus Aurelius Calvus dies at age 28, having lived exactly 10 years as a concubine and gladiator. His story, reconstructed from fragments of historical evidence and contemporary accounts, illuminates the brutal machinery that operated beneath Rome's cultural achievements. The empire that produced magnificent literature, revolutionary engineering, and sophisticated law also systematically destroyed human lives for entertainment and pleasure. The institution of male concubinage reveals Rome's fundamental contradictions about masculinity, power, and human worth. A culture that celebrated courage and honor simultaneously created systems designed to destroy both qualities in designated victims. Men like Marcus existed in the spaces between Roman ideals and Roman realities, their lives shaped by the gap between public morality and private indulgence. Yet, Marcus's story also demonstrates the persistence of human dignity under even the most degrading circumstances. His ability to form genuine relationships, to learn and grow, to fight for autonomy and meaning, suggests that the human spirit proves remarkably resistant to systematic dehumanization. Even within slavery's confines, moments of authenticity, connection, and resistance emerged like flowers growing through cracks in marble. The legacy of figures like Marcus extends beyond individual tragedy to broader questions about power, consent, and social responsibility. Rome's appetite for beautiful slaves reflected not just personal indulgence, but systemic violence that wealthy citizens perpetuated through legal and economic structures. The emperors who banned certain forms of sexual abuse while maintaining slavery itself embodied the same contradictions that defined their culture. Modern parallels prove disturbingly relevant. Contemporary forms of sexual trafficking, labor exploitation, and systematic degradation echo patterns established in ancient Rome. The mechanisms that transform human beings into property for others' pleasure operate across cultures and centuries, adapting to new technologies and social structures while maintaining their essential brutality. Marcus's story reminds us that behind every system of exploitation stand individual human beings whose lives matter beyond their designated functions. The silence surrounding male concubinage in historical accounts reflects broader patterns of selective memory and moral discomfort. Roman writers acknowledged the institution's existence while rarely examining its human costs. Modern historians often focus on political and military history, while minimizing the systematic sexual violence that characterized daily life for thousands of enslaved people. This silence serves the same function it did in ancient Rome, allowing societies to benefit from exploitation while avoiding moral responsibility for its consequences. But voices like Marcus's refuse to remain buried forever. Archaeological evidence, legal documents, and fragmentary literary accounts preserve traces of lives that official histories sought to erase. The beautiful young men who appeared in Roman art and literature as mythological figures had real counterparts who suffered real abuse in pursuit of others' fantasies. Their experiences challenge comfortable narratives about ancient civilizations and force confrontation with uncomfortable truths about human nature and social organization. The transformation of Marcus from concubine to gladiator represents more than individual character development. It symbolizes the possibility of resistance and self-definition, even within systems designed to prevent both. His choice to fight rather than submit, to risk death for the chance of dying with dignity, suggests that human agency persists even under the most constraining circumstances. The arena became his stage for reclaiming masculinity on his own terms rather than others' definitions. His death in combat carries multiple meanings that resonate across centuries. On one level, it represents the ultimate triumph of Roman entertainment culture over individual human life. The system that enslaved Marcus also killed him for public amusement, completing the cycle of exploitation that began with his childhood sale. Yet his manner of dying also represents a form of victory over that same system. By choosing combat over continued sexual servitude, he transformed himself from victim to agent, from property to person. The Roman audience's response to Marcus's final performance reveals their own moral confusion and unconscious recognition of the system's brutality. Their enthusiasm for his courage competed with their investment in maintaining the hierarchies that made such courage necessary. They could celebrate his transformation into a warrior while refusing to acknowledge the sexual violence that motivated his desperation. This selective empathy allowed them to enjoy the spectacle while avoiding responsibility for creating it. Marcus Aurelius Calvus lived and died within one of history's most complex and contradictory civilizations. His story illuminates both the heights of human achievement and the depths of systematic cruelty that characterized ancient Rome. Through his experiences, we glimpse the real human costs of empire, the price paid by individuals to sustain collective prosperity and cultural accomplishment. Yet his legacy transcends historical curiosity to offer insights relevant to contemporary struggles against exploitation and dehumanization. His persistence in maintaining dignity despite systematic abuse, his ability to form genuine relationships within constrained circumstances, his courage in choosing death over continued degradation, all speak to enduring aspects of human nature that survive even the most brutal attempts at suppression. The tragic life of Marcus represents thousands of similar stories that remain unrecorded and unremembered. Behind every great civilization stand countless individuals whose suffering enabled collective achievement, whose sacrifice sustained others' luxury, whose silence preserved others' comfort. Acknowledging their existence and honoring their memory represents not just historical accuracy, but moral necessity. In remembering Marcus Aurelius Calvus, we remember not just one young man's tragedy, but an entire system's capacity for transforming human beings into instruments of pleasure and violence. His story challenges us to examine the mechanisms through which contemporary societies perpetuate similar patterns of exploitation and degradation. Because in the end, the question is not whether we are better than ancient Romans, but whether we have learned enough from their example to recognize and resist the machinery of dehumanization in our own time. The marble halls where Marcus once performed have crumbled into ruins. The arena where he died has become a tourist attraction. The owners who purchased and sold him have been forgotten by history. But the human dignity he struggled to maintain, the courage he demonstrated in choosing death over degradation, the connections he formed despite systematic isolation. These aspects of his story endure as testimony to the persistence of humanity within inhumane systems. Marcus died as he had lived, caught between competing definitions of masculine worth and human value. But in death, he achieved something that eluded him in life. He became a symbol not of Roman decadence, but of human resistance, not of systematic brutality, but of individual courage, not of perfect victimhood, but of imperfect heroism. His story reminds us that even within the darkest chapters of human history, individual lives matter, individual choices count, and individual dignity proves remarkably difficult to destroy completely. The tragic life of a male concubine in the Roman Empire illuminates truths about power, sexuality, and human worth that extend far beyond ancient history. In Marcus's story, we find both warning and inspiration, both historical insight and contemporary relevance. His voice, silenced by death nearly 2,000 years ago, still speaks to anyone willing to listen about the cost of turning human beings into commodities, and the possibility of reclaiming dignity even within systems designed to destroy it.